The meeting of the Sioux Falls Districting Commission set for May the 2nd at 12 noon will please come to order. First of all, we need to approve the minutes for the meeting of April 24th. Do I have a motion? So moved. Deb moves. Second?
I will second that.
Jason seconds. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, voice vote. The minutes are approved. I would note for discussion as we will begin to analyze the maps, that's the next item on the agenda, that Mark has an option F, which he has placed before you. Jeff has drawn those maps, and those are placed before you for your consideration. And so since it's open discussion and we're analyzing all the maps, we will also include option F for your consideration. And Mark, I'll let you, we can open the discussions by just asking Mark to explain option F. I think the rest of us have had the others to look at for a while. So if you want to just give us an idea of what you have done, and we will go from there. So Mark, please.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Jeff for putting it together. Just in looking at the options that we had, this is one I've been playing around with just a little bit. I was trying to attempt the least number of changes possible while still trying to anticipate future growth. This isn't necessarily a solution, it's just another option to consider. And just to go through a couple of the changes and a couple of those maybe that I didn't mess with. I struggled a little bit with precinct 1-8, which is currently in the Southwest District, which I propose moving into the Northwest, just because I think that's an area that, with looking at the projections for future growth, may end up that, along with a couple of adjacent districts in the, or precincts in the Northwest District, may end up in the Southwest District again someday. But this cleaned up the boundaries a little bit. One of the things I was trying to achieve was looking at natural boundaries, such as the Big Sioux River, such as the interstates. In this case, 41st and Marion is one of those boundaries, as opposed to cutting through the middle of a residential neighborhood, which some of these precincts do. You know, somebody's living on Hawthorne Avenue, for example, and they're on the east side, they're in the central district, they're in the west side, they're in the northwest district. Neighbors are represented by completely different districts. And so that cleaned that up a little bit. It also balanced the populations of the southwest and northwest districts. Had I left it alone, the Southwest District would have been at or slightly above that 5% threshold. So by moving that, as you can see, it kept them balanced pretty close to 36,000 residents. The future shift, it appears, toward the southeast in future population growth. In this particular case, precinct 2-1. Trying to look at what I've got. I'm sorry. Well, let me go back. The Southeast District moving District 2-4 from southeast to northeast creates a clear, distinct boundary along East 26th Street. Moving 515 from the central to the northeast creates a distinct boundary along the Big Sioux River and addresses some of the population shortfalls, if you will, in the Northeast District. Precinct 5-6, which was one of those in option D that had been moved to the Northeast District or proposed to the Northeast District, I left that in the central. That could be moved from central to northeast if there's concern with the population imbalance between central and northeast. One of the reasons that I made central as large as I did was looking again at the future growth being more toward the outskirts, more toward the southeast and the northwest in particular, not seeing that rapid growth in the central district like we would in some of the others, that the others would probably catch up to that. On the west side, the west edge, 1-2 that I was referring to earlier, which is currently in the southwest, moving that to the central. Again, that boundary on the left-hand side would then move to Kiwanis Avenue. And then 3-7 and 3-8 while they look rather elongated, most of the population there is on the inside of Kiwanis Avenue, to the east of Kiwanis Avenue. Right now, their boundaries, the eastern boundaries, are in residential neighborhoods. This would push it back to the interstate. Not a lot of people live to the west of Kiwanis in those areas. There's a pocket of homes south of the fairgrounds, south of 12th Street, and there's a few homes to the west of Kiwanis down around the country club area. But for the most part, it's the country clubs, the golf courses, the zoo, the softball diamonds, a lot of open ground there that those residents of that area, I think, probably connect better with the central than they do with the northwest because of the large land area that's open. I can stop there. I could go on, but that really just touches on the reasons for moving those districts. I think in the future, looking ahead, the central district, there's always a possibility of moving further south. I think that was option C that we had. Precinct 2-1 looks like that would, certainly be a consideration, and the southwest may end up moving a little bit into that southeast down the road too, as the southeast grows, where you might see 210 and 215 move more toward the southwest. But that's for future commissions to consider. Right now, we're just trying to strike a balance here going forward. So I just offer it as an option. You can pick it apart, you can dismiss it, but one more option to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We'll open it up for open discussion on that. First of all, I would like to do two things. First of all, asking Jeff, now, this will be redistricted again, probably with the 2020 decennial census. Is that the likely time? It's 15%, is that right, roughly? 15% population growth?
At each census, we will update our numbers, and if there's a 15% growth rate with any of our estimates.
Okay,
So at any one of those opportunities, correct.
Probably
In 2021.
Probably 2021 when you get the hard numbers for the 2020 would.
That's correct.
There's a better than 50-50 chance that that would be our next
Correct.
districting
Yeah.
opportunity.
Because again, that will be, doing math in my head really quick right here. So that will be in 4 or 5 years, and at 4,000 people a year, we're going to be at another 15 or 20,000 people.
And that's enough there. And then one other calculation that I did, I looked at the average number now at it being about 35.6, 35.7 of the 5 districts. If we had 15%, that would bring that number then to, that would add another 5, it would put it somewhere around 40,500 or 40 to 41,000 for the average size district.
Yes.
So that might be helpful as we look at the maximum numbers here. That might be helpful just to think about as to where we're going. So now I would just call on anyone to comment. First of all, we'll ask if anyone wants to eliminate any of the options at this point so that we can pare down maybe the number of options that we have to work with. And I'd open the floor to any discussion about paring down the options at this time.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Eckhoff.
Yeah, am I understanding then on option D and option E in the Northwest, because the variance is greater than 5%, we can't use those?
Option, Jeff, I believe we're all right on all of them. I think you've come within the 5% on each one of them. I had a question about that. And
I was just looking at the spreadsheet that's handed out today.
Correct. The interpretation and the decision's been made before that the differential is 5% plus or minus, so that you have a less than 10% differential. So even though that's a 6.42%, the less than creates, there's never a difference of more than 10%. So it's the differential of plus or minus 5%. So you have to take the highest number and the lowest number, and if the difference between the highest and the lowest number is less than 9.9, you still meet the standard. And to specifically answer your question, D and E are still options that are viable.
Well, I'll wade into this thicket if no one else wants to. I'm thinking that now that we have option F, option D doesn't need to be considered. What's the feeling of the commission on that? Or that could be one we could eliminate and still get most of the good moves out of that. So, what do you think, folks?
Mr. Chairman, I'm okay with,
Please, Jason.
I'm okay with eliminating D.
Okay.
It was not one of my 2 or 3 choices that I had studied on and looked at and reviewed, so if we want to eliminate that one, we certainly can on my behalf. I'm good with that.
Okay. Commissioner Eckhoff, Commissioner Ellison, what do you think? Is D a favorite of yours? No. Okay.
Nor of mine.
Nor
I
yours?
like the idea of keeping the boundaries within the river. I think that was a
Yeah, I
good,
thought
good
F,
thought.
clean, did a nice job on that, so. All right, we can, I'm going to do that by motion then. Well, I don't know, do we need to do it by motion, Tom, do you think?
I think you probably should.
Okay, I would take a motion then to remove option D from consideration as a map, so.
I will make that motion.
Okay, Jason has made the motion. Anyone second? Second. Commissioner Ellison seconds, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, unanimously, we would remove option D then, which will simplify things a little bit. I might just do this. I might take a note. Again, I've asked for, has anyone fallen in love with option C and wants us to make sure that we keep that in the mix?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I had a question about that on the criteria that we were following. One of the criteria talks about the number of districts which include territory in more than 1 county shall be as few as possible. This one actually moves the central district into 2 counties, which would be in conflict with that.
And I could address that if it's okay.
Please.
So just with all of the, with the 5 criteria that are out there, there is the clause at the beginning to meet the criteria to the extent practicable. But you're correct. In this case, there are some practical implications for creating a 3rd district in what is Lincoln County. But also I think the interpretation of the criteria is pretty clear that if at all possible, don't minimize those numbers of districts that are fully in, that are in 1 county. So I think it would be definitely a negative in terms of the criteria that you're talking about, which is number 4, the number of districts which include territory in more than 1 county shall be as few as possible. So I think that's something to strive for.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Mr. Millich, and I would actually move to remove option C from consideration.
Commissioner Ellison has moved that we remove option C from consideration for redistricting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Eckhoff is second. So all in favor of removing option C from consideration for the redistricting plan, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, nay? Option C then has been removed from consideration. That brings us to option E. Comments on option E and its retention. Well, seeing no one either opposed or let's I think we'll keep option E, and then we do need to discuss B and F. Well, I should probably ask to make this fair. Anyone wish to remove option B, option Bravo, from consideration? Seeing no sentiment for that, I think at this point then we have Bravo, Echo, and, Bravo, Echo, and Foxtrot retained for consideration. Do I have that right, Tom? Three of them? Okay, so we have 3 plans for consideration, and let us now then proceed to open discussion on Bravo, Echo, and Foxtrot. Mark, do you want to make a pitch for, you've made your pitch for F. Does anyone have questions of Mark in looking at option F? And
Mr. Chairman?
yes, Jason, please.
Looking at option F, I really do like it because it does hold a little more of the volume into the central district, which I do not believe is going to observe as much growth, and I think that will really limit what needs to be changed during the next time. Putting that there and helping kind of maintain that core going forward and eliminating a huge need to make a lot of changes specifically to that central district. My only concern is, and not specifically to the southeast, but as we start moving that way, southeast, southwest start running into each other, but through the development plan, we saw that a lot of the growth is going to come to the southeast, so the number is fairly down there. However, I see that northeast and southeast becoming a bit of a push in future times. I don't have a recommendation to adjust any of that, but again, with a majority of that growth expected in the next 5 to 7 to 10 to 20 years, we see that southeast will undoubtedly grow quite a bit. So looking at it now, it's acceptable, but I anticipate more of a shift from that southeast more into the northeast only by looking at this one, which eventually will make it a little more difficult for the future groups to look at that and really not have to make many more changes as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. I think you've hit that pretty well. Mark's had his shot. Commissioner Eckhoff or Commissioner Ellefson, please. Ellefson,
I have another
Ellefson.
question. Is there a preference to the committee as how far we winnow maps down before they're presented for possible public comment? Do you want to present them with 1, 2, or 3 options?
Yeah, we're down
Could
to...
I address that from the hearing, the charter perspective? So you will have a recommended, essentially you'll choose an option for the public hearing, but at that public hearing you'll have obviously your recommended option, but you're also okay presenting an additional option or even 2 options for comparison or whatever, because the presumption is that you may come back from that public hearing and want to make some adjustments.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Well, given that answer, Commissioner Ellefson, do you have further comments which you wish to make? Thank you. Thank you. Because we have, at the current time, we have 3, so which is a manageable number, I think, probably. Commissioner Eckhoff, any comments on where you are and which one you like?
I would be leaning towards B and F right now. I have a question on option E, 1-4. Can you give me some idea of the geography of that? That seems to sort of stick out apart from the rest of the Southwest. E? Yeah, or just in general 1-4, precinct 1-4. What's the geography of that? It just seems, I liked Mark's discussion about Kiwanis, and that makes a lot of sense with 3-7, 3-8. And then you move down and you get to 1-4. I'm just kind of help me orientate to where that is.
Sure. With 1-4, you are north of 57th Street there and west of Minnesota Avenue. So you're in the northwest quadrant of Minnesota and 57th Street. And then it goes up to 41st. So it's the northwest quadrant of 57th to 41st Street. And you can see again, where my hand's at on the PDF, the Big Sioux River kind of starts to go through there on the east over to the west.
I'm sorry, Jeff, is that Minnesota or is that Western Avenue on the east side of that? Looks to me like it's Western.
It's western there. And so it's 57th and Western. Thank you for the clarification. And so where my hand's at, that's 57th and Western on the northwest quadrant. And then where the hand comes in, that's a big Sioux River's coming in for that barrier there at 57th and Western.
Thank you.
Okay. Further comments? The chair would note, when I did a little bit of work and I played around with B, and all I did was move 1/8 up into the northwestern area. I believe that, and I did that to even out the northwest and southwest, and to make northeast, northwest just a little bit larger. But I think option F does a better job of doing, especially in terms of geographic or street limits, as to where people would rather be or where would recognize where they were. So I'm pretty happy with with B modified to look like F. So frankly, at this point, rather than just moving one district. So that's the only thing that I had done to change any of this, quite honestly. Anybody else anybody else think that we ought to make more major changes than we are because of the fact that we're going to have a decennial census coming up in 2020? Does that concern anybody at all at this point? Not particularly? Okay, then I won't mention that further. So, other comments on B, E, or F? Bravo, Echo, or Foxtrot?
Just a quick question. I don't know if it's a question, maybe it's more of a comment. On option E, again, going back to those geographic boundaries, if instead of moving 5-6 into the northeast, we were to move 5-15. Again, trying to anticipate where those, we don't know what the future is going to hold other than what's projected population-wise, but at least that 5-15 might fit better with northeast than folks living down around 33rd and Cliff, which would be the bottom of 5-6. And I think it still keeps it within those population parameters.
Thank you, Mark. Comments on that option? That would be option G, probably. Does that create any problem since northeast? I would just ask a question, Mark. Do you think that creates a problem since that would actually make the northeast district a little smaller than it is right now? And it's already the smallest one. Its growth was, let's see, northeast growth was about even in the between 11 and 17. So do you see a problem with that, making it even a little smaller?
Well, potentially. It takes it down to the same number. I think it's in option F. Because I think that ends up being the same changes.
Okay, you're not, I thought you were bringing 5-6. Did I miss that? Bring 5-6, and it has about 2,300 people, and there are only 1,500 in 5-15.
Right.
So it's pretty close. I don't think it's probably a
going to
huge
drop
problem.
it just below 34,000.
Yeah.
It'd be the smallest population-wise.
Yeah. So, again, further consideration. Does anyone have a current favorite? Is it too early yet, Tom, to pick a current favorite, do you think?
It's whatever you all decide to do.
Yeah. We probably don't have to at this point. Is there a sentiment on the commission to pick a favorite? Commissioner Eckhoff?
My thought is that move that Mark suggests makes a lot of sense. And I think if you both F and B do that, I think in some respects we could probably eliminate E and just work off of B and F.
Okay. There's certainly the ones that people seem to gravitate around the most, but maybe should we keep E around as an alternative for some people to discuss?
That would be fine with me.
Okay. Any objection to that? Then we've got that. Do you want Jeff to draw an option G with the change that you've made? With that suggestion, Mark? Pretty easily done, I think, isn't it, Jeff?
You can.
Mr. Chairman, I
Jason.
believe at that point, though, we do get well beyond that plus or minus 5% or 10 threshold there, putting it down at 33.9 and going up to leaving the Northwest still at 37.8.
That's a difference, yeah.
We're pushing a pretty big barrier there on that one for option G, if that's what you'd want to call it, so
Okay.
that would.
Anyone have a comment? I'm hearing that we don't need an option G at this point. Have I heard that correctly?
I think Jason's right about the population spread. It would be just, I think, just beyond that 10%.
Okay. All right, then.
Then we'd have to start messing with the Northwest.
Yeah. I think we've saved you some work, Jeff. So, all right, then I believe what I have heard is that the commission is currently thinking they want to look at B, E, and F seriously, maybe possibly even include those for public consideration. Would that be a fair statement at this point?
Yes.
Yeah. People would be all right with that. 3 options is not a bad thing. I agree with that. So with that, Tom, should we go? Should we talk a little bit about the public hearings? You have some points that you need to make in regard to that. So maybe we'll move to that item on the agenda, item number 4.
We can, but maybe before I get into detail about dates and such, the charter does say that you'll submit a proposed plan for the public hearing. So I think for the purposes of this, you would have to come down, and it doesn't necessarily have to be today, but you would have to come down on one option that you're going to propose. But I think for the sake of the public hearing and for providing comparison and facilitating feedback from the public and what's been done in the past, you can also present at that, options, Q&R or whatever the other options are, but you need to go into the public hearing with a recommended plan.
We need to write in with a flag, and then we'll see who salutes it and who doesn't.
And let me rephrase that too, because I think what you'd like to do is when you go to the public meeting, you're going to say, we have currently on the table B, E, and F, and our recommendation is F, so that they start to go, because otherwise they're going to show them, well, which one are you leaning towards? I mean, when they come to public hearing, they're going to look at the district and go, so what, when you go, well, we really don't know. If you start to indicate, then they're going to say, of these 3, well, we really preferred B because they're going to give you more direction if you have a recommendation, but that's what the public discussion is going to be because they want to really start to hear what your direction is, what your recommended plan is.
Yeah, we wouldn't be required to stay. Obviously, that would make the public
Still have all
meetings
3
meeting.
of them on the table.
You go into it with B, E, or F. It doesn't mean you can't come out of it with, a different one or a hybrid.
Okay. All right. Very good. So is someone comfortable with actually making a recommendation at this point for the purposes of the public hearing only? So,
Mr. Chairman,
Jason.
I am okay with presenting option F as our choice and giving reasons for that as far as addressing future growth, where it's going to be, and really pushing that really does help us going forward and eliminating, or not necessarily eliminating, but really keeping the number of changes down for the next time, addressing that issue.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Weingarten has moved that we adopt option F as our recommended redistricting plan for the purposes of public comment and public hearing. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Representative Millage seconds that. Discussion. Commissioner Ellison.
I have a question. It is fair to say that this map F is the one that does take into greatest consideration street boundaries when you were moving?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. I didn't know, were you
Whether
directing
this
it-
map does indeed take into consideration street boundaries perhaps more than the other 2 maps that we're considering.
It does that as well as geographic
Okay.
boundaries too, yes.
Further discussion.
But again, it's all based on precincts, those precinct boundaries.
So, It does not have a second yet, so we're, oh, we did, oh. Oh, that's right, Representative Millich, that's right, he did, I'm sorry, I'm corrected. It does have a second. Further discussion? Anyone want to propose an alternative plan? We do take additional motions. Seeing no one at this point then, up for your consideration is the adoption of option F. And should we, do you want to? Oh, okay. Okay, we can do that. Should we do that before we go? We do have an, since we have a motion on the table, do you want me to defer action on that one? Or? You can vote on it. Okay, all right. We will, since we do have an option or a motion on the table with a second, we will have to dispose of that. Option F is our recommendation for the public hearing purposes. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, unanimously option F has been adopted then as our recommendation for the purposes of public hearing. In concert with that, since we have a couple of people here, we invite you to step up to the podium if you'd like to make a comment or two about where we're going, and I would open it up not only for the plans themselves, but also if you have some kind of request in regard to how the public hearings ought to go and when they ought to be scheduled. So,
Hi,
Councilmember Staley.
Teresa Staley, council member. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for serving. And not only are you serving, but you are allowing yourselves to be videotaped, which, as you may know, was a contentious issue previously about boards, and so bravo for that. What I wanted to ask, and this maybe has a little more to do with Jeff Schmidt here, but I've been concerned for years about the public's confusion when it comes to voting, where they're going to be going. Now we're going to be adding another layer of confusion by maybe taking a precinct out, moving it over to a different location. So I'm going to ask Jeff what we will do as a city. I want you on the record here saying that we will perhaps do some mailings to let people know when this is all said and done, where they're going to be casting their vote next April.
I think, Councilor, if it's okay, I think as the election official, I could answer that. Yes, so if there, first of all, our goal in coordination with the counties has been to make sure that we keep the same polling places from year to year, but that does change. I think seeing the path forward, given the changes, at a minimum, we would provide a notification to the people, to the registered voters in the precincts, if their precinct has changed, because in this particular case, it wouldn't just, obviously there would be likely no change to their polling place, but there would be a change to who they would be voting for. So yes.
Yeah, I think we're correct on that, that option F, well, it does move a couple of precincts, and we have no choice about that because you still have to maintain one person, one vote, and meet also the requirements of the charter. At the present time, we haven't moved any precinct boundaries at all. We've moved them wholesale. So what would cause a precinct boundary change? Huge infusion of population into one precinct, or what would cause a precinct change?
The criteria in the South Dakota law is really the benchmark is you want as much equity as possible. That's not necessarily written in, but the key thing that people look at during elections themselves is the wait time. Generally, what it says in the law is if you have more than a 30-minute wait time, then you do want to look at those times. And you may recall Auditor Litz was here last time and did speak to that a little. There has been some concerns raised in here just about the disparity between some of the precincts. Again, we're looking at population numbers, not necessarily voter registration numbers. Again, the population is the intent and the goal, the purpose of this commission. But it is something, again, as Auditor Litz said, that we would take a look at within the next couple of years here.
Okay, thank you, Tom. That said, then it appears that is, precinct boundaries and precinct equity is probably a discussion for another time and probably another group. So so right now we're moving whole precincts, and for our purposes, it works. It works in concert with the precincts that exist today. So no confusion at this point. So, all right. Anyone else wish to have? Yes, sir. And please identify yourself, sir. They probably know who you are, but I don't.
I'm Mark Weber. I live in the Central District in 5-4. I have a little bit of a concern. I've talked to Jeff Schmidt about this before the last 2010 census. I have a little bit of concern about population estimates based upon housing statistics, because when you divide the number of residents that's in 5-4 by 2.38, you come up with a number that's a lot less than what there actually are based upon previous publications of the city. I realize that there is a difference between voting districts and census tracts, but that's basically my concern, that city population statistics, they may have been reliable in the past, but they were not reliable in the 2010 census, that the city overestimated city population by several thousand people, and that's partially because of migration patterns, and in my opinion, and the recession. So that's just basic. I'm just basically concerned with the underlying methodology of this.
If you'd stay up at the podium for just a second, sir, I think commissioners have questions of the gentleman.
I do. So are you saying that that number under 5-4-2316, are you thinking that there are more people living in that precinct or fewer?
Well, I realize that the 2.38 probably comes from the census. I'm just saying that if you take that figure of the population and divide by 2.38, I'm saying that there are more housing units in the All Saints neighborhood than what is than what is listed here. And the reason I say that is I have gone down to the as part of the All Saints Neighborhood Association. I'm not a board member or an officer, but I have gone down there and checked on both landlords and residents, people that are homeowners, and my numbers, I come up with something different than what the city has. I'm pretty sure the Central District that population is about the same, because you're not talking about any growth patterns there. I'm just concerned about the general methodology that's being used here for population projections.
Thank you.
Are you saying the entire Central District? And I'm still not clear. Are you saying that there's more people or less people?
I'm only referring to what I'm familiar with the All Saints neighborhood.
5-4?
Which is 5-4.
And again, do you believe there's more? I'm understanding it that you think there's more people than the 2,300. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. I just clarify. Thank you.
All right. Do you have, I would ask you, sir, any other ideas on how you might do it then? Because we are pretty much tied to census data, especially with the fact, yeah.
If you go by your criteria, you should be waiting to do this until the official government numbers come out in 2021. I think this is all preliminary.
You do understand that we have a city charter that requires it?
Yes.
Yeah. We'd have to change that.
But I think you're also you're violating one of the principles by saying that you should be only doing this by census. I think you're jumping the gun on this.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Any further concerns about the Central District? I think under our recommended option, it sits at about 37,000. It's about 36,000 under option Bravo, and it's about 35,000, just a little under 35,000 in option Echo. So it does have some variability. Maybe yeah. So anyone else concerned about that, or do we need to move forward and see if there are other people from the Central District that come forward at the hearing and see what they have to say about it too? Because right now we only have one precinct that we know that we have an opinion about. We don't have much else, and that's only 20. That is 20. It's one of the larger precincts, I agree. But out of 35,000 to 37,000 people, we're talking about 2,300. So we probably need more data and more information than we have. I'm thinking. Anybody disagree with that, or think we have a better shot at what we could do there? Yeah.
No, sir.
Yeah, right now, I'm at a loss, too, to see what we would be able to handle unless we change the entire process, and that's well beyond the scope of this commission, frankly, so, because it's controlled by charter. So, that being said, Tom, I think that's the only people. Tom, do you want to speak to the deal, the potential, the requirements and the potential dates?
So the next requirement, having come down with the recommended option, is just to briefly, well, actually, I think settle on the public hearing or hearings. The charter requires that we give notice 30 days prior, at least 30 days prior to the hearing, and that the hearing is at least 30 days prior to your submission to the City Council. With that in mind, I put on each of your desk, and it's also on the table, the calendar that you're familiar with, and I think right now we're generally on track with the initial one. So what I would recommend is that we can look at a public hearing in June, and on that particular calendar that you're looking at, it says June 16th, and that was really just like a center point, but really you can vary between June 14th and up to June 17th to have 1 or 2 hearings. I would say in the past 2 commissioning, districting commission efforts that the city's undertaken, each time they've had 2 hearings. One was either on a Wednesday or a Thursday at 6:30 p.m., and the other was on a Saturday at 10 a.m. Turnout isn't tremendous at these, but it's still an opportunity for folks to come out at a time that's convenient for them, given the options to express their thoughts. So my recommendation would be the 14th at 6:30 p.m., and that's a Wednesday, and then the 17th, which is a Saturday at 10 a.m., which is the time it's been in the past. And again, we're not bound to it, but it's been the pattern over the last few commissions. So I think first deciding on at least a first date, and then the next thing we could talk about is the content of the public hearing itself and how you want to have it conducted.
Invite comments from the commission on holding hearings on the 14th and the 17th of June, meeting our requirement for a 30-day notice period to the public, and leaving 30 days afterwards for notice to the council for their city council. I'll let you look at your calendars a little bit.
Tom, how many people, do you need all of us there for these hearings, or just the chair?
Yes, we need a quorum here to conduct the hearing. So at least 3 people, but ideally all of you.
Do you have
And I could send out, Chairman, if needed, if folks don't have their final schedules here, I can send a note out, but I think it would either be the 14th or 15th, and then possibly that Saturday too. So really those 2 days for the weekday meeting.
How do schedules look?
I'm out of town on the 14th. I'm back the 15th. I'm out of town again on the 17th. But I do agree we should have the 2 hearings, though. I think that schedule's good.
So we can look at the 15th is fine too. I just threw
I'm
the
out
14th
of
out
town on the 14th too, but I would have been willing to change that. But if he's going to be out, does the 15th work for everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
At
Let's
6:30.
I'm sorry, I'm gone on the 15th, too. But if you have enough,
okay,
as
go
long
to-
as you have 3, you're good.
No, let's get you there. Can we hold them back to back, Tom? Night of the 16th and morning of the 17th?
Well, I think the goal of doing it on the Saturday was just that people don't work and have all the hustling after work and everything else that they have to contend with, which is why they did it on the Saturday. Let me just look at this real quick.
How do you feel about back-to-back, 16th and 17th?
Well, Friday night probably would not be ideal. I think that the goal is to have an evening one and then a weekend one.
Yep.
But I mean, Mr. Eckhoff's point is well taken. We don't have to have all 5 here, and
Oh, I'm at a wedding in Rapid City.
Okay.
I think you may run into some conflicts on the 15th being a Wednesday. Some of us do have some church functions and other things that we're kind of obligated to on those nights with youth group and everything else. So that may be a conflict for others as well. I'm certainly able to make it if need be, but
Right, so the Wednesday is the 14th, Thursday is the 15th, so it sounds like if we're going to do a weeknight that week, it would be the 15th.
I would be okay with that.
Okay. Anybody else have a conflict or a concern about doing the evening meeting on the 15th day of June, starting at 6:30? Okay, evening meeting, June 15th, Thursday, starting at 6:30. How much time do we set aside?
And then
Ended
there,
or-
it's open-ended, but I think generally they've gone no more than an hour and a half, Jeff. And then the other question is, and I think there's some preferences already stated, doing one on the 17th at 10 a.m.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to do that in separate motions. And first of all, request motions that we hold the evening meeting on June 15th, a Thursday, starting at 6:30 p.m. Invite a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Okay. Moved in second. Did you get those both of them, Tom? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay. June 15th then will be the first meeting, and then June 17th, which is a Saturday, at 10:30. Those meetings will be held here in these chambers?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right.
10 or 10:30 is fine, but you want to go with 10:30?
Oh, no, I misunderstood. 10? That's fine, too. Yep, no problem there. Okay, so I'll ask for a motion then to approve the second meeting, the Saturday meeting, weekend meeting, for June 17th, a Saturday, at 10 o'clock a.m.
I will make a motion for that.
Jason moves. Second?
Second.
Okay, and Jeff seconds. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. That is approved as well. So that will be the second meeting. So we now have, we have two meetings, and we have a recommended plan, and we have a couple of plans for them to look forward to also reviewing, and we're in decent shape.
Yep, and so maybe I'll ask Jeff to kind of tag team on this. I think the concept would be with a 6:30 start time, we'll publicly notice it for 6:30. Generally, there's an open house, Jeff, where people get to walk around and ask questions, and then we'll do a formal presentation, a hard time of maybe 7 o'clock.
Yes, and I don't want to take you all the way back because you've already made a recommendation and already done. So you do an open house, and this is typical to all open houses. So we'll have 3 boards up. We'll have B, E, and F, in here, and we set them up, and then you're standing around and you're answering questions, and we'll have like another board that has the charter requirements up, but we just have that information up so then they can look at it, they ask questions, we'll have comment sheets up so they can fill it out, but you're here to answer those questions. And then halfway through with open houses, you break and say, okay, here's the presentation. For 5-10 minutes, you give them the overview, and then you break back down to the open house. So why I was saying I don't want to confuse the issue again, but so now you're talking about from 6:30 till 8 is really your open house. We have found that it may work better if you went from 5 till 6:30 or from 5:30 till 7. When you do them from 7 till 8:30, the problem you have is people basically get off work, they run home to get some, and at that point, you're already home, and you're like, well, at this point, I'm home. I mean, seriously, now I'm home. I got and I'm not going to go back out. Even nights, they're just like, I'm done. I'm not. So if you capture people, especially for an open house, you're like, okay, you know what? On my way home, I'm going to stop. It's an open house. They come in, you capture them at 5 o'clock or 5:30, even if you wanted to go. And you get them because it's an open house. You get them on the way, and they're like, well, you know what? Because I got 6 o'clock baseball, and I got soccer, and I got kids. I got to get dinner. And then you get them. It's sometimes a lot easier for people. And you think about yourself. I mean, and then you guys decide, do you want to have that break to get supper, which is a great thing, or do you capture more people by letting them come home? Because it's not a formal presentation. That's always the issue. When it's not a formal presentation, do you get more people by having the break, or let more people if you don't have the break?
can we schedule the open house, since we have a motion approved to start to notice things at 6:30, but we can have the open house anytime we want, as long as it encompasses that 6:30 to time
But,
span.
yeah, our requirement is to set the hearing time, so 6:30 for the hearing, and we could be here earlier for the open house.
Okay. Comments on Jeff's proposal that we open the doors at, say, 5 or 5:15 and let people look at maps and look at the criteria and so on?
But if you advertise it at 6:30, when would you advertise the open house from 5 then?
Yeah, we'll advertise it starting at 5:30. We could even start at 5:15 or 5. I mean, we'll just set 5 o'clock.
Okay.
We'll put that in the notice, but the actual hearing will be at 6:30.
Oh, okay. I thought the motion was to start it at the open house at 6:30. I just want to be clear that that the public understands that it's the 5 or whatever we decide, and that communication is clear so people are showing up at the correct time. Because I agree with Jeff. I think that after work is probably a better time, and then they have Saturday morning if they want to come out specifically.
Well, we could just avoid confusion and just revisit the motion, amend the motion, and make it 5:30.
One of the things I was going to ask about, too, is what about the open meeting laws? If some of us came and milled around with people and listened to comments, if there are 3 of us here, is that a violation then?
Well, we're still noticing it, but, I mean, based on what Jeff's saying, we have started just as a point of information at 6:30 for the last few, but it sounds like we want to go earlier, so we'll do that. I think you just get a motion to change the time to 5:30.
I would entertain a motion.
I mean, what are you guys more comfortable with if you were the citizen?
Comments? Jeff?
I would be more comfortable with 5:30. I agree. I'd do it on my way home.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. Okay. Then the chair would entertain a motion to amend the previous motion setting the hearing on June 15th for 6:30 p.m. to amend that motion to set the hearing for June 15th still, but at 5:30?
I'd make a motion to amend to 5:30.
Okay. Eckhoff has made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Millage has made the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Then we have amended the motion and the time for the first hearing for 5:30 p.m. All right, do we have an open house with the Saturday meeting as well? And do we need to, is 10 o'clock a good time for that, or do we need to revisit that? Comments from the commission, or from Jeff, actually?
It's the same on Saturday. I mean, you think about yourselves and how busy people are. You just go, as long as you have that opportunity. Middle of the day is brutal. If you go, okay, we're going to have it from 2 till 4. No one's going to break in the middle of the day. But if you get it early enough or late enough, then just can think about yourselves too. You're like, do I really want to get something involved and then stop and then come out? So you move it earlier in the day or you put it late in the day. And early and late is up to you. You decide what you thought is your right time frame. That's what we tried to do with the Saturday morning too. It's not like you go, hey, we're going to do it at 6 o'clock in the morning, but you go, yeah, whatever early is, you start it.
10 a.m. would let people sleep in. Yeah. Are we okay with 10 a.m.? What's the feeling of the commission?
So the open house would be at 10?
At 10, yeah.
And then then the hearing would start at 11-ish?
But we'll notice it for 10 and let people mill around, and we'll just drop the gavel. Then we've met the open meeting requirements at that point.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Okay. Not seeing a need to change the second motion then. We have, I think, completed our business. Or do you have something for that?
Well, just one final thing. You're probably going to want to do a follow-up meeting after that, and I'll just send a note out and because you're going to want to wrap up and kind of digest what you saw at the public hearings, and we'll shoot for something possibly the week or within 2 weeks after that. Then we can start working on the report.
Yeah, I think the sooner the better, in that it'll still be fresh in everyone's mind. So, all right. Commissioner Elfson.
I have a question. Has there been any contact with the Lincoln County Auditor? I know Auditor Litz came to testify, and has she been formally
Yeah, I had
noticed that this
contacted
is-
her, and my conversation with her was that I'd keep her apprised if there were going to be any impacts to the precincts in Lincoln County, but with the exception of option C, which I kind of assumed would be moving out, there really haven't been any, but I will keep her in the loop on what we're doing.
Thank you.
And then last Wednesday evening, Councilmember Staley and I were down at a council meeting in Lincoln County last Wednesday evening. And so I talked to her before and after the meeting too about keeping her abreast to this issue, just like Tom was doing. So we talked Wednesday evening.
Thanks, Jeff. All right. Any further business that needs to come before the commission?
Are we going to meet one more time to work on our presentation for the public hearing? Are we going to go with F and just let everyone else, I mean, we've agreed that F is our recommendation. Do we need to discuss how we want to present that when we do have the hearing? Are we just going to recommend F and say, please take a look at B and E and let us know, or how do we propose to handle that?
I don't know. Mark, would you be willing to make, if we did it just on the fly, would you be willing to make the presentation, since you know option F probably the best of anybody?
Sure I can, yeah.
Okay, how does the commission feel about that, letting him make the pitch? At that point, somebody's got to explain, you know, and pitch the bill, as they say. So is that acceptable to the commission?
If Mark is okay with that, I'm very good with that.
And I would think, you know, if there are any questions that come up, there might be some during the open house, that those could be addressed as part of the presentation too.
And Jeff will be present, right? You'll have these so you can pop them up on the screen so people can look at them. Will we have copies of these maps at the open house for people to grab and look at, do you think, or?
We will. Yep, three options, and Jeff could be prepared to, after Mark presents F, just to talk about some of the other options that were looked at, those being B and E.
That would be, and you're comfortable doing that, Jeff, I would assume, since you've done the maps, so very good. All right, is the commission then comfortable with having Mark make the pitch on option F, and then Jeff will follow up with option B and option E, and obviously there may be some questions from the public at that time, and we will field those once we've dropped the gavel. Is that fair enough?
Well, you're talking about at the public hearing? Yes, they'll definitely, they'll have an opportunity to speak, and I'll work with you on the actual agenda.
Yes. All right. That will work. I think because we do want. I think that we would want their comments on the record, not just a conversation in the hallway. I mean,
Right. And Jeff was mentioning there'll be comment cards if people aren't comfortable getting up and speaking. Just so you know that when it's noticed, there is an opportunity for people. We'll provide a contact to me to provide comments for that 30 days prior. And then when they come that night, they can fill out a card. Anytime within that 30 days, they'll be able to come in and look at the maps, and we'll put them online as well.
Okay. All right. So we've given people more than adequate opportunity, I think, to comment. So comfortable with that, Commission? Okay. All right. Then I think we have a plan for the first meeting on June the 15th. Is any further business? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Commissioner Eckhoff moves to adjourn. Second?
Second.
Commissioner Eckhoff seconds. All in favor say aye. Aye. Right. Then we are adjourned.